Today, I'll share 3 simple tips to transform old clothes into something new and exciting. With just a little ingenuity and a few simple steps, seemingly old items in your wardrobe can be refreshed and reused conveniently. If you also like these little tips to make your clothes look better without buying new ones, let's get started. Tip number 1: Shrinking the collar. After a while, the collar of many shirts often stretches or becomes loose, making them look less neat than they did initially. Especially with t-shirts or shirts worn frequently, the collar easily becomes too wide. So today, I'll share a little trick to help shrink the collar, making the shirt look neater and fit better without having to buy a new shirt. First, lay the shirt down on a table or a flat surface. Then, use a ruler to draw a straight line from the collar down to the shoulder. This line will help you determine the position where you need to sew to shrink the collar. Next, fold both sides of the collar so that they are symmetrical. Once folded evenly, use tailor's chalk to mark a symmetrical point on the other side of the collar. Then, use a ruler to draw a similar line as before. This ensures that both sides of the collar will be symmetrical and look more natural after sewing. After marking the points, I started preparing the needle and thread to begin sewing. I threaded the needle and began sewing from the inside of the shirt, so the stitches would be hidden inside and look neater from the outside. I poked the needle from the inside out, starting from the point marked with chalk. Then, I inserted the needle along the original neckline. The sewing method I used was a zigzag stitch, meaning the needle went from right to left and then back again. I sewed along the marked line, each stitch being even. When sewing this way, the thread would create a connection between the collar and the neckline, allowing me to adjust the tightness of the collar later. When I reached the end, I held one hand at the end of the collar and gently pulled the thread out with the other hand. When you pull, you'll see the collar start to shrink, making it look neater than before. Once you've achieved the desired shrinkage, tie a knot to secure the thread and prevent the collar from stretching out further. Then, do the same with the other side of the collar, sewing using the same steps to ensure both sides are symmetrical. After sewing both sides, fold the collar to check if it's even. If both sides are symmetrical, the shirt looks much neater and more attractive. With just a few simple stitches, I was able to tighten the stretched collar, making the old shirt look like it's been repaired and allowing it to be used again conveniently. Tip number 2: Creating a focal point on the shirt. In this tip, I'll guide you through a simple way to create a focal point on your t-shirt, making it look fresher and more eye-catching. First, lay the t-shirt flat on a table or a flat surface. Adjust the shirt to ensure it's perfectly flat for more accurate measurements and marking. Next, use a ruler to determine the location for the focal point. Measure about 7 centimeters from the armhole down to the body. This will be the starting point for the decorative line. Then, measure about 9 centimeters from the hem of the shirt inwards. These two distances will help create a balanced decorative area on the shirt. After determining the location, use tailor's chalk to mark the points you just measured. Then use a ruler to draw a perpendicular line connecting the points. This line will be the guide for sewing the decorative details onto the shirt. Once the markings were complete, I began preparing the needle and thread to start sewing. I threaded the needle and started sewing from the inside of the garment along the hem. I poked the needle from the inside out so that the stitches were hidden, making the garment look neater from the outside. Once the needle was out, I threaded a small purl onto the thread. Then, I continued to bring the needle down along the line marked with tailor's chalk to secure the purl to the garment. Next, I threaded another purl and continued sewing along the marked line. I repeated this process, sewing and threading purls, until I had completed the initial 9 centimeter mark. While sewing, I tried to keep the stitches evenly spaced so that the pearls would be aligned and look more aesthetically pleasing. Once the entire decorative section was sewn, I gently pulled the thread to bring the pearls closer together. When they are close together, the decorative details will look neater and more prominent on the shirt. After adjusting, I tied a knot to secure the thread on the inside of the shirt to ensure the pearls wouldn't come loose during use. Then, I cut off the excess thread. Finally, I adjusted the shirt and looked at the overall picture. Now, a small pearl decoration has appeared on the shirt, looking very delicate and creating a striking highlight for the simple t-shirt. With just a little skill with needle and thread and a few small pearls, my old shirt has become much more stylish and new without having to buy a new one. Tip number 3. Create a focal point on the collar. In this final tip, I'll share a very simple way to create a focal point right on the collar. Just a few small stitches will make the shirt look completely different from the original, neater, and with a beautiful decorative detail. First, lay the shirt flat to make it easier to work with. Then, choose 2 points on the collar and fold them together to determine the location for the focal point. Once you've determined the location, measure about 7 centimeters along the collar. Then, use tailor's chalk to mark this position. To ensure the collar is symmetrical, mark another symmetrical point on the other side. After marking, lay the collar flat again to begin sewing. Next, prepare the needle and thread. I started sewing from the inside of the shirt, poking the needle from the inside out so that the stitches are hidden inside and look neater on the outside. The stitching method I used here is a V-shaped stitch. I sewed one stitch to the right, then the next to the left, and so on, creating crisscrossing stitches in a V-shape. I sewed along the marked 7 centimeter sections, making sure the stitches were even, so that when I pulled the thread, the fabric would gather nicely. After sewing the entire marked section, I gently pulled a straight line of thread. When pulled, the stitches would bunch together, creating a small twist on the neckline. This detail looks quite delicate and makes the collar stand out more. Once I adjusted the bunching to my liking, I tied a knot to secure the thread on the inside of the shirt to prevent the collar from unraveling. After completion, the collar has a beautiful little twisted detail, making the simple shirt look fresher and more eye-catching. With just a few skillful stitches, you can transform an ordinary shirt into one with delicate decorative details without having to buy a new one. The video ends here. If you have any comments, please leave them below. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a like. Don't forget to share it with your family and friends. Remember to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Goodbye. See you in the next video.